so here is a daily mobility routine, just going through all the major joints of the body, at least moving them a few times to start, or at least once a day, moving them through as full of a range of motion as you have access to. So the first concept that we want to get into is this concept of kind of whole body stabilization, or otherwise known as irradiation, which is really just a kind of isometric contraction throughout the body that is aiming to stabilize all the bits that aren't moving, but also increase kind of the neuromuscular participation in these movements. So the real intention behind this is to start to explore range of motion with a sense of control and a sense of ability to create some force or generate force throughout these ranges of motion. So our whole body irradiation is really just a bracing throughout our whole trunk into our legs, right down into our feet. So we're going to start off with our cars for the neck. So you're going to brace throughout everything else, just creating a little bit of a whole body isometric contraction. So if you thought about your force as if it was on a volume dial, 0 to 10, you're going to just create a whole body sort of isometric bracing contraction of about 3 out of 10 or so, 3 to 4 out of 10. So enough that, you know, a border collie wouldn't be able to throw you off balance, but maybe not the same amount of force or bracing that you would do if a linebacker was trying to tackle you. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the side. No, maybe I'll stay facing forward. I'm going to start off by bracing through my trunk, sustaining my breath, although my breathing comes a little differently because there is this contraction. I'm going to drop chin down towards sternum, keeping the rest of me all nice and still. I'm going to start to slide my chin along my collarbone, moving that chin towards the armpit. As I get to the armpit, I'm going to start to dump the contents of my head out through my ear onto my left shoulder here. Continue this rotation, taking my chin up towards the ceiling. My right ear is going to dump the contents down my right shoulder. My chin's going to turn towards my right armpit, and then I'm going to take that chin along the right collarbone back to center. All right, so I'm going to repeat that one more time. Notice how I'm keeping my mouth closed and I'm trying to keep everything else still. I'm going to turn to the side. So no popping of my rib cage. No swaying through my trunk. No shifting through my shoulders. Okay, and then we'll get into our spine. I'm going to cross my hands across my shoulders. I'm still bracing through my trunk and through my lower body in particular. I'm going to really monitor myself for these kind of movements where my hips are shifting back or forward. If you don't have a mirror, you can feel that in your feet. You really want to feel like your weight feels centered over those heels and doesn't shift as we do this. So I'm going to start by drawing my sternum down towards my belly button as if I'm trying to get my nose towards my belly button, and then I'm going to start to rotate over to the right, keeping my weight over those heels. I'm going to start to lift that sternum up towards the ceiling, or as close to up towards the ceiling as you can get away with. My left shoulder is going to start to tip towards the floor, and then I rotate back and around. So I'm really trying to avoid kind of this sort of motion. You can kind of see there's a bit of a hula actioning happening in my hips. I'm just going to do one in the other direction. I'm going to center my stance. You can see from the front here. So embracing the movement you have available to you and not trying to give that circle any more range than what is actually available in your spine. So really locking down all those other bits. I'll show that one more time from the side. So I'm rounding through my spine. Notice because I'm not bending through my hips, this is as much flexion as I can get out of my spine. Any more and that starts to become hip movement. So here, and then I start to round. And I'm going to do, ideally we're going to do 2 rotations in each direction. You can do more, but we're looking for about 2 in each direction. Moving through that range, trying to make it as big as possible without shifting anywhere. The other cue I would give would be to take this movement and imagine you're in an atmosphere of jello or some sort of like memory foam. So as you move, you are moving with a little bit of pretend resistance, as if your body has to push through your jello atmosphere. All right, so there's our spine cars. We're going to get into the scapula, so the shoulder blades here. So I'm going to show this from the side. So I'm going to glue my hands to my sides, elbows straight. I'm going to shrug my shoulders up to my ears to start, and then I'm going to slide my shoulders forward. Keeping them forward, I'm going to slide down, dropping my shoulder blades down along my rib cage as they go. And then I'm going to slide back, which is my shoulder blades retracting. And then I'm going to try to sustain that retraction. Those shoulder blades are drawing towards each other as I shrug upwards and then slide them forwards again. So making essentially a box here. Again, I'm trying to keep my head and my rib cage really nice and locked down here. My body's going to have the illusion of more movement if I give those other areas a little bit of freedom. I don't want to give those areas that freedom. So what I mean is, if I let myself pop my rib cage forward, I feel like I'm moving my shoulders farther forward. I'm not. I'm just moving my rib cage. So and now I'm reversing. I'm going to shrug up to the ears. I'm going to try to slide those shoulder blades back. Notice my shoulder blades are still shrugged up. And then I'm going to try to sustain that drawing together, that retraction of my shoulder blades as I drop them down into the back pocket. And then I'm going to slide them forward or protract. All right, so you're seeing my shoulders move, but this is actually a scapular motion. All right, head, rib cage stay locked down, moving my shoulder blades against my rib cage. All right, next we're going to get into the shoulders. So the shoulders we're going to do one arm at a time. I'm going to show just 2 repetitions on each arm so that I don't make this video too long. I'm going to start with my palms forward. I'm going to really lock down my trunk. So I'm stabilizing my feet into the ground, engaging quads, hips, trunk, even this other arm can engage. Palms forward. It's going to start to come in front of me as it also lifts in above or towards an overhead position. As I come overhead, I'm going to unscrew my hand, bringing my hand back and down behind me. Notice my hand ends with the palm facing back. I'm going to drop down so that, all right, so palm forward. I'm going to lock down my trunk. So I'm watching for this kind of stuff. If we're tight in our shoulders, we're going to, again, give that illusion of more movement of my arm by rotating through the trunk. So I'm going to lock that trunk down Keep it nice and square, keep the ribs still, rotating or circling that palm up. Notice my elbows straight, 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 reaching into that overhead position or whatever your shoulder has available to it. Palm or arm unscrews as I start to reach behind me. Keeping in mind I'm moving through the Jello atmosphere. I'm actually just going to do all sets on this side. So turning to the side, I'm going to go back in reverse. So palm is facing back. My reverse circle is sweeping back. As I come back, I can feel that need to unscrew my arm as I sweep it up. Coming into my overhead position and starting to rotate that palm forward as I come down. All right, I'm going to rotate palm back, engaging trunk. Everything is holding me still. So if we have a sticky shoulder, you're going to find your circle is going to potentially be a little different than mine. Or you may find your body wants to give you a bigger circle by doing some of this stuff or doing some of this stuff where the shoulder hugs up to the ears. Don't let that. So 2 moving this way, 2 moving this way. All right, next we're going to get into the hips. So the hips are nice, done with a little something for balance. I'm going to use a dowel. You could hold onto a chair or hold onto something more static like a wall. The dowel is going to work pretty well for me. I'm going to actually use the dowel to add a little bit of force. I'm going to press into the dowel to create a little bit of that bracing through my trunk. And then the movement is going to be this. I'm going to inward rotate my thigh. So I'm going to rotate my femur towards the other side. Bending the knee, it's going to start to sweep up in front of me. As it comes in front, I'm going to start to rotate that thigh outwards, lifting my knee as high as I can, lifting that foot as high as I can. So this is external rotation. Taking that knee out to the side, I'm again going to unscrew that hip. The foot starts to rotate behind me as that knee draws out to the side, still keeping it as high as I possibly can, and down. I'm going to reverse that, and then I'll show that on the other side, or show that in the other direction. So from here, I'm going to squeeze that leg behind me, kicking that heel towards the wall, but keeping my trunk nice and tall, keeping this as stable and still as possible. I'm going to start to lift that leg out to the side, letting that foot kind of rotate as it needs to. And as I bring myself in front, I'm going to try to exaggerate that rotation, bringing that foot around and down and in. All right, so from the side, I'll stick to the same side. It's going to look like this. I'm bracing, engaging this standing leg, engaging, pressing into that hand. I could even brace with that other arm, and I'm going to internally rotate, cross over, start to sweep up as I lift that foot as high as I can, taking that knee out to the side. Naturally, that foot starts to drop behind me. The knee scours that limit of my hip movement, coming into this extension and down. Here it would be in reverse. So in reverse, I'm going to extend, kick that heel back behind me, start to lift that knee up as high as I can get away with. The rotation in my hip, meaning my foot is kind of reorienting itself into that crossbody position and down. Okay, so there is the hip. 2 circles in one direction and the other direction. and then we'll switch sides. Next we have the knee. The knee is a bit of a funky one because it has a couple different movements that we usually don't think of. So our knee has this movement known as tibial rotation. And tibial rotation is if you flex your foot, flexing your toes towards your shin, and then start to twist those toes side to side. If you felt your shin bone, you should feel this subtle little rotation inwards and outwards. Ideally, it's fairly even in both directions. So the knee cars, because our knee doesn't do these big movements, is going to be a bending and extending combined with this tibial rotation. So I'm going to lift my thigh. I'm going to hold my femur or my thigh really nice and still as I rotate inwards, and I hold that as I extend the knee, and then I rotate outwards and flex the knee. Rotate inwards, extend, rotate outwards, and bend. Oh, that was 3 repetitions, an extra for good measure. I'm going to then rotate outwards and extend, rotate inwards and bend. Outwards, extend, inwards, and bend. All right, so there's my knee. My ankle, the ankle really has a lot of movements. So we've got these movements, eversion and inversion, combined with a little bit of movement, pointing and flexing also makes up supination and pronation. So we're going to try to explore all of those. I'm now going to hold my shin bone because I actually want to minimize that tibial rotation because I want my ankle joint to explore its movement and not pair that with the movement at the knee. So I'm going to try to stabilize that as I flex my toes, pulling them up towards my shin, and then I'm going to start to rotate that foot out to the side, keeping it circling as big as possible as I bring it down into almost a pointed position, sweeping around and lifting up. So that was one. I'm going to do a second one here. And I'm really trying to stabilize that shin bone, which I can feel underneath my fingertips, and trying to isolate this movement in my ankle joint. And then we're going to reverse. Remember, you're moving through your jello atmosphere, even though these are smaller joints, still contracting and creating that nice bracing throughout. All right, so that is your ankle. So looking for 2 circles at least in one direction and in the other direction on each ankle. Both knees, we're going to pretend I did both. So last 2 joints, I meant to do these before, but we'll get into our elbows and our wrists. So our elbow is kind of like our knee in that it has this rotational movement called supination and pronation. Not to be mixed with the bigger arm movement of rotation in the shoulder, but if my elbow moves independently of my humerus, that's supination and rotation. So I'm going to keep my palm up. I'm going to flex my elbow, turn palm down, straighten the elbow. Flex and straighten. And again, I'm creating that bit of resistance in the air as if I'm moving my hand through jello or memory foam. I'm going to keep this prone position, this with the palm down, and I'm going to turn and extend, palm down, and flex, palm up, and extend. So those are my 2 directions with my elbow. My wrist, I'm now going to keep the wrist or the elbow the upper arm and the elbow bent at 90 degrees. I want to keep my forearm as still as possible. So this one I find quite hard to control. You can almost imagine, or you could actually place your cell phone on your forearm and try not to lose it. So I'm going to try to keep the shape of my hand, minimize the funky stuff that wants to happen in the hand, as well as keep my forearm still. I'm going to extend the wrist and start to sweep it around, keeping the hand position nice and long, and fighting to not take that forearm with you. So trying not to create that sort of motion, trying to isolate the movement in my wrist, and trying to minimize the compensation, or the way our body will give us that illusion of doing a movement by moving in other places. So I want to try to avoid the claw hand or these funky things with the hand as I create those circles. All right, I'm going to repeat here. Again, I'm actually creating, even though the wrist is a relatively small joint, I can feel how much the rest of the muscles in my arm are working to hold those other bits nice and still against this movement. And then I can feel that even creating the need to stabilize through my trunk and into my lower body. Now I'm going to get more out of this movement in regards to my nervous system and how it speaks to my muscular system, that neuromuscular system, if I also create that global contraction. So I think we did everything. Neck, spine, scapula, shoulders, then we got into hips, we did knees, ankles, elbow, came back up, elbows, and wrists. All right, so that is the morning routine. When you're not following along with me and all my wordy direction, it should take you probably hopefully no more than 20 minutes. All right, I would suggest that in the morning or anytime. I tend to pepper these throughout the day. I try to do it all in one go at least once, and then I try to just stick some of these guys into my day over the course of the day to just, again, give my body those little doses of movements and positions and shapes that it might not see otherwise.